This is Steve Zeltzer with KPFA WorkWeek Radio, and I'm here in Germany at the Bundestag talking with
Pascal Meiser. I'm a representative of Die Linke, the left party in the German parliament.
And Linke, what's its political view and how many people does it represent in parliament?
We are a party in a tradition of democratic socialism, and we are like the fifth largest party in parliament, having 69 members of parliament of our parliamentary group, and having a number of rank and file members, about 60,000 within Germany.
And in the United States now, DSA has 60,000 members, so but they don't have proportional representation, so they have a different electoral system.
Luckily, we have a proportional representative system, which makes it more likely that, like from a left position, from a minority position, which we still are, we can put pressure on the mainstream politics.
Now, the situation of labor globally is in crisis. The 2008 economic decline meant losses of millions of jobs. Millions of Americans lost their homes. It also meant mass dislocation of people having to leave their homes and other areas. What was the effect in Germany of 2008 on the working people here in Germany?
There were effects on this worldwide economic crisis, but the effects were not that hard than it was in the United States, as far as I can compare, because there was a active government policy, no left-wing government, but a center government, which were actively trying to countersteer with an active policy of labor market interventions, supporting industry workers who were affected by the loss of or at least endangered by the loss of jobs. So they managed to keep quite a lot of people in their jobs, even when the demand for the products they were producing, for example, the car industry, was reducing. So they put some state money, like tax money, to counter that effects coming from the world economic crisis. And this was a very important sign. We were supporting that from the left. We were asking for more state intervention, but in the end it was an effective way of countering the worst effects of this crisis.
Now, one of the policies introduced in the United States has been deregulation. Deregulation of the airlines, deregulation of the transportation industry, and it's had a very big effect on the conditions of working people. What is the effect of deregulation in Germany?
We have that debate in Germany and the whole of the European Union the same way we have it in the United States. But I think the best time of this neoliberal deregulation has already been in the past. Like in the 90s and the 2000s, there was a strong pressure from the neoliberal think tanks influencing all of the parties. This has changed within the last 10 years. I would say slowly it has been changing, but in these places where the deregulators were successful, it has really bad consequences for working people. For example, in the mid of the 2000s, there has been a massive deregulation of labor laws. So in the end, the income of the working people has been reduced by these effects, because temporary work had been extended, and at the same time, the pressure had been heightened on the working people by worsening the conditions for the unemployed. So all this came in the mid-2000s, and so we still are affected by this. Now there are slowly countermeasures taken in consideration, even by the center government we have at the moment, and we are putting pressure on it so that to re-regulate the labor market to protect working people.
And of course, technology, the gig economy, temp workers is growing not just in the United States, Japan, South Korea. 60% of the people are temporary workers. For these temporary workers,
well, there's an increasing number here as well, and for the labor movement in Germany. As for the political left, this is some new terrain still to find answers, because the situations are like different than to the traditional working class labor force. And so, so we have the increasing number. I think it's still less than it is in the United States, for example. But like in these areas where we have this sort of gig working or crowd working staff, the conditions are really bad. There's no social protection for them usually, because the social security protection schemes are all like around these like standard like working contracts. And based on them, like the social...
As an independent contractor, they want everyone to be an independent contractor.
This is the... Yeah, this is what's happening. Well, from a formal point of view, that's what they try to establish, this sort of gig working. And in Germany, there's a legal dispute on that, whether you really can call them independent, like self-employed people, or whether they are in fact dependent, which they are definitely from an economic point of view, but from the legal point of view it's not that clear. And we, as Die Linke, the left party, we are asking our government, demanding that we need strong regulations to make it like clear that those who are economically dependent, like having only no own capital, no own real enterprise, only their own labor, which they're selling on this gig market, crowd working markets, so that they have the same protection as the classically employed workers.
And companies like Amazon, which has become one of the biggest companies in the world, are they trying to develop in Germany, and is there a struggle here of the Amazon workers to get union rights and recognition as regular workers?
There is. Amazon is a big player here in Germany, and they're having their logistics centers here in Germany and in other like countries of the European Union, close to the German border as well, like in Poland, for example. And they try to establish their anti-union policy. They're used to, coming from the United States, try to establish that here.
Union-free environment.
Union-free environment. Well, yeah, of course, that's what they try to. They're not the only ones, but they are, of course, they were like infamous for like this policy. But the trade unions have tried to tackle this, started organizing in this logistics center, and trying to force them to sign a collective agreement. Until now, they have not been successful. There have been offers of Amazon to sign collective agreements, much worse conditions than like the standard in the
substandard contracts.
Substandard contracts, but at least they're
willing to sign a contract.
Yes, and this is different, of course, because it's pressure. There are strikes going on in some of these sites of the Amazon logistics center sites, but they are at the moment they are not strong enough. They're organized number of working people there is not high enough, so they can really put enough pressure to really push them or pressure them into a collective agreement, which would be a standard or non-substandard agreement. But yeah, there is a struggle going on, and quite a lot of people are really watching what's happening there, because they say, well, this sort of symbolic struggle, whether this sort of kind of big companies with this anti-union tradition will be successful in establishing here. And we have other examples, non-US examples as well. For example, Ryanair, which is a big Irish-based airline.
It's the second largest airline in Europe now.
Yeah, it definitely is one of, and they are having really, really bad working conditions for the people, temporary workers there, and all this stuff, and substandard contracts, of course, making quite a lot of money with that, and the struggle of the cabin crew and pilots as well, not only cabin crew, has started, I should say, last year with new power And they forced Ryanair, for example, to sign a first collective agreement in Germany, like in the beginning of this year. Remembering that, like the chief executive of Ryanair said, hell will freeze until I sign a collective agreement. Well,
he had to change his tune.
I have no idea how it looks like in hell these days, but if you imagine that, there are successes, but it's still a hard struggle with these sort of anti-union companies coming like from another tradition, and we are struggling hard. Yeah.
In the United States, 10 to 12,000 workers are fired every year. These are the workers that go and complain to the National Labor Relations Board for illegal firing. Nothing happens. And is this the case in Germany, where workers who try to form unions are fired or retaliated against?
I think there's not such a high number, like where we have like illegal firing because of like they try to organize or. But it is illegal in Germany as well.
What is the punishment?
Well, I cannot tell, actually.
I mean, if a worker is fired illegally in Germany by a company, does the employer get fines or criminal prosecution, or what is the accountable process?
There's no criminal prosecution on that. There is like a labor dispute, a legal labor dispute on that. So the illegally dismissed worker has to be employed again, like on this level. Where there is a criminal offense is in respect to founding works councils. We have in Germany these, I think, very German tradition of a dual representation of the working people within the workplace. It's the works council, which is not officially like part of the trade union, which is an independent thing. The trade unions, of course, support the founding of works councils, and they try to majorize like these councils, but it's independent of them. And on the other hand, you have the trade unions who try to organize, to recruit like members, and there are collective agreements.
What power does the works councils have?
They have like legal rights, for example, on information on what the
company has to provide information to these work councils.
It has to provide information about like stuff like on. Or what's going on.
Plans of the company,
exactly.
Development of the company.
There are restrictions on financial issues, not on every detail, but in general they have to provide the information, and there are rights of, let's say, co-determination in like limited aspects of like the company's running. For example, if there's, and this is interesting in respect like to the new digital companies introducing new IT systems, there's a hard co-determination right of these works councils. So no new IT system can be introduced in a company.
That's revolution in the United States.
In respect to
compared to the United States.
When this law was set up, IT systems, for example, or communication systems were only a small bit of like a company's like. So imagine that like on these new tech companies. So this is a hard issue there, but also on individual employees' rights. They have a right of like being informed what's happening. Some decisions cannot be made against the veto of like the works council. In the end, there's a system like of like that. It's never like the works council decides on the things in the end, but it can delay things, they can stop things.
It can be an obstacle to what the company wants to do.
And it depends on the company's culture, because of course the boss like in the company doesn't want to have to hustle all the time, so he starts arranging, and he starts of course to accept some standards of like co-saying, or like let them, the works councils have a say in some things, not in the the main decisions. Otherwise, you would be having hustle all the time. So yeah, that is like this. Yeah.
And one of the things that's a danger in the United States is health and safety. There are explosions, their oil refineries are blowing up, railroad accidents, very big catastrophes because of a lack of health and safety. And workers who complain about health and safety problems in the United States are retaliated against, fired and punished. What is the situation with healthy safety rights in Germany for workers and for whistleblowers who are trying to protect the health and safety in the workplace?
Health and safety, of course, is an issue in all, like, on our workplaces, and depends on which like kind of work you have a look. But it's not such a big issue. Like, so we have health, of course, but like the like you say, the safety issues, explosions, all this, it's not that big issue.
It is a very big issue in the United States.
I can imagine. But of course, looking at health issues, you have like this increasing number of psychological diseases coming with stress, coming with these
mental illness.
Mental illness.
Well, that's where the pharmaceutical companies can make some money, selling more drugs.
They could, yeah, but the pharmaceutical workers would benefit of this, but no, like the mental problems, increasing with stress, that they are becoming a big issue these days, as they are not like covered by the legal regulations on health and safety issues. Health and safety issues in Germany are still, basically still thought of the point of view of having like this hard working conditions, like on the physical,
not mental stress.
Not on the mental stress. And this is a big debate how to cover that, because on like the bodily, the physically working conditions, there are rather strict laws. We have a problem of enforcement, but the laws are not that bad. We have a problem of enforcement.
And why do you have a problem with enforcement?
Like, for example, of new industries, which have no like tradition of like trade unions or works councils, and where there are no works councils within the industry, within the companies, there's nobody like checking that. Getting back to what rights does the works council have, like checking like the health and safety issues, very one of the main competences they have, the works councils, and if there are problems, they can tell, for example, if there are really serious problems, they can tell the state agencies to intervene. So
the work councils can report serious health and safety problems. I mean, in new industries like biotech, for example, in the United States, there's very little regulation. And in fact, OSHA, which handles health and safety in the workplace, is not even trained properly to take care of problems in biotech industries. So there's dangers and a lack of regulation. What is the situation with the biotech industry in Germany?
I can't tell, to be honest. There's no big issue on that. I would say I think this biotech and which are quite often linked to the traditional chemical industry, pharmaceutical industry, they usually have rather strong works councils, and I guess because never been like confronted with a like specific problem from that industry, that there is a specific industry. We have more problems with health issues in the services, because like the company structures there are like
McDonald's, or what kind of services? Food services, or
for example, like the new emergence, like delivery services, all this, which having not that side where like the workers meet, like coming together, organizing, and for example, and the whole logistics is a really a big issue, because like getting back to Amazon, like having like these increasing numbers of online trade going on, like the back of it is like the logistics, not only in the Amazon hubs but also on the streets, like in like having these big lorries, like carrying all this stuff to the country, but until till the end when this stuff has to be delivered to door. So within all this logistics, there's a big issue.
And Die Linke, does Die Linke have a position on these companies and the gig economy or temporary workers, the rights of temporary workers?
We want to strengthen the right of these gig and crowd workers. Like on the one hand, we want to safeguard that more of them are actually getting the same protection than the traditionally employed workers have. This is an illegal issue, and those who are really self-employed, like by their whole approach, those who want to be self-employed, they need a new sort of different protection. So there are social protection schemes for self-employed here, but they traditionally deal with the owner of a company who is self-employed, not with somebody, we call it solo self-employed, single self-employed, having no employees working for him. And so this is where we need new schemes for those. For example, within the health insurance, they already are allowed to get into our, let's say, public health insurance system. But the question is, how much do they have to pay, contributions every month?
So is Amazon paying into the national health insurance plan in Germany?
Well, they have to, for their employees, of course.
Even if they're temporary employees?
Well, that's now we are getting back to the term of temporary employees, because I'm not sure whether we use the same way. If they have a contract, are employed, no matter whether it's only for a month or 2 months, they have to, of course, to pay the health insurance contributions.
Do they pay pension plan too?
We have a state pension system here, so of course they have to pay the contributions. This is the system. The German system is about the contributions to the health insurance or to the pension insurance, we call it. Half paid by the employer and half by the employee.
And that's a requirement for all workers in Germany.
It's a requirement for all workers with some small exemptions, but this is the general rule. But it's different if you are having no employee's contract, if you're not employed, if you are formally, legally self-employed. If you are self-employed, all this does not take place. So that's why it's very important to, from a legal point of view, to dispute when you have which status in that respect.
Well, they're contracted out workers through privatization, for example. Privatization of public services in the United States is a big issue to nonprofits, and they do the same work as public workers, but they make about 30 to 40% less, and they're not under a public service pension. Is there a same issue of that in Germany, where workers who were formerly doing public work at a public institution are now contracted out and working for a nonprofit, what they would call a nonprofit?
There is. At the high time of neoliberalism in Germany in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a high number of these sort of privatizations and outcontracting, as you call it, and outsourcing. Yeah, we call it outsourcing as well. So there was. This has been stopped within the last years, but in the end, on a lower level of public workers. And the working conditions, at least in these private services industry, I call it private services, they are usually worse than in the public sector. So yes, this outsourcing also has the effect, or had the effect, that these working there are getting less money. Sometimes those working, it depends on the way how they did it. Those having old contracts still kept their old like conditions, but those newly employed like getting worse conditions. But I think the contrast is not that like harsh than what you described from the US, because looking at the pension scheme, like those working in this privatized like non-profit or profit organizations, they still are like having
still in the pension system. They're still in the national pension system.
Pension system, because
that's different in the United States.
It's definitely different. So they're not falling that deep. You know, if they are not public workers anymore, they're probably earning less money, which is worse enough or bad enough. But so this is not that hard that they completely having a different life.
Now, immigrants have been coming into Germany for many years, including particularly from Turkey. A large number of Turkish immigrants who live in Germany now, but also the recent influx of Syrians and other immigrants. What are the conditions for these immigrants, labor conditions for these immigrants in Germany?
Well, I think you have to take every immigrant group by themselves, because like it depends on the time they came, the reasons they came for. So looking at this Turkish immigrant group, which is the largest one indeed, there is a large number. It's like Italian and, for example, people from former Yugoslavia or like from Italy. They've been like asked to come like to Germany because there was a need of more like people working in their heavy industries. Like in the 60s, for example, and then till the 70s, and then like those were working hard. They're working with quite often with worse conditions than the rest of the workforce. And at the same time, the trade unions tried, like after they got used to new people coming, try to organize them. And in the end, in these heavy industries, they became the backbone of like the trade union movement. Like but it's different with like, because you mentioned like these people fleeing from Syria, for example, coming to Germany in the last years. They were not asked to come for like as part of the labor force or to increase the labor force. So they came for humanitarian reasons.
They were refugees.
They were refugees, so they were in high need, of course, so they need help. And the German system dealing with like people coming from other countries, like seeking asylum or being refugees because of like a temporary civil war, which is not temporarily really, if you look at Syria. But those coming, they have no right to work in Germany. So they're coming to Germany in the first place and have to wait till the status is cleared, the legal status where they're allowed to stay, and this can take years sometimes, and quite often they are not allowed to work as long as their status is not cleared. This is a big problem. But of course, after a while, they start working here in a legal way or
off the books. You mean without being
informal
informal economy, and that creates another problem
as well. That it does create problems. That's why we from the left-wing position say those are legally here all of them should be allowed to work from the first day, because this creates new problems. But at the same time, we know like those people coming from these poor backgrounds, like being in need and that desperate need, they quite often work for conditions no unionized worker here would work for. So this creates new tensions, of course.
And the right wing, the growth of the right wing in Germany, have they used the migration as a justification for their political views?
Well, they definitely have. Well, there's a new right-wing, radical right-wing extremist movement like arising, and they've been fueled by like this resentments. We like some people still a minority, but a big minority in Germany had against these new incomers, against these refugees, and they have been fueled. But if you look at it in detail, they are more focused, this sort of new right-wing party, which is not so different to the US president if you look at the rhetoric and all this stuff.
Liberal Trump?
They have close links sometimes to Breitband and all this, this sort of Trump supporters. Steve Bannon has been here.
What is Steve Bannon doing here? He's organizing in Germany? Does he speak here? What is he doing?
I think there was one event with him I think last year, but it's said, I don't know if it's true, but he was sent over here to Europe to support right-wing formations,
nationalist, racist organizations. So you have the Americans now apparently coming to Germany to encourage nationalism and racism, as Trump and his party have done.
Well, we have enough of that in our country by ourselves.
We don't need.
We don't need. No, we don't need. Well, I can understand it might be nice. Well, from the left-wing US perspective, to think, well, they should go abroad. We get rid of them here, but they cause new problems, which is very interesting. They're always talking about the nationalism and all this stuff. At the same time, they have this so-called international cooperation of nationalists, which is a contradiction itself if you look at it. But they have a common ground, which is the white supremacist, you call it, approach. And
is that a worrying thing for the people of Germany?
Well, for me personally, it definitely is, and there's a quite high number worrying about it. At the same time, you have to face the truth. There is also mass support, not a majority, luckily, but it's a struggle whether we be successful to keep this minority and to see whether it's possible. We'll see, at least to find ways of people let's say leaving their right wing parties behind him and saying, well, we are coming back to sort of you would say probably liberal has a different meaning in Germany, but to the left side of the scales.
Now, one of the things that is going on, of course, is the United States in Ukraine and supporting the militarization of Ukraine. There's a big crisis in the United States between Trump and the Democrats. What was Germany's role in Ukraine? And the United States now wants Germany to contribute more money for military in Ukraine, increase the military budget in Germany for those purposes. What's your view about that?
Well, the budget issue is a big issue, having this pressure from the NATO and being represented by Trump, but it's not only Trump, it's the whole NATO. At the same time saying that Germany should increase its military contributions, and one of our former center governments said they want to reach these given goal, 2% goal. There was no parliamentary backing of that, but the government was promising to the NATO they will, and now they say you have to. And
but they would have to get it passed through Parliament to increase.
Well, of course, yeah. So there's the budget. The budget is one of the main rights of every parliament in a representative democracy. So the same here. So the military expenses cannot be risen without the support of the parliament. And every year when the budget is dealt with, this is a big issue. And the current government, they are the Conservatives and Social Democrats, which are
in a
coalition government, center government, I would say, or half right, half left, whatever, but sort of center government at the moment. They're increasing the budget step by step, not in these big steps than Trump would like it to be, and there's even within the coalition is a dispute going on that.
Because an increased military budget would mean cutbacks in social services, healthcare, education. Is that a real concern that you have?
It definitely is, as long as our economy is growing. Like it's only a question where to put more money, but in times where the economy is not running that well anymore, or the taxes are like reducing, of course we have the question whether to spend the money for the military or for the social welfare state or what else, education, and just this week we are having the budget week, and at the end on Friday, tomorrow, we have the final say on the budget for 2020, and this is one of our main points of critique, these military expenses are increased, and this is a real big problem, yeah.
And of course, the United States spends trillions on war. Militarization, while the infrastructure is falling apart in the United States, people don't all have health care, and education is being cut and privatized. What is your party's view on military and militarism that is taking place now around the world?
Well, we are very much concerned on the international development, and the situation from our point of view is becoming more complicated because compared with 40 years ago, because it's much more players, it's like a multiplayer thing, and we have a sort of raised a new sort of imperialism, I'd say, in my words, but it's not the classical ones. You have different powers competing on influence in different regions.
Well, what did you think about Trump telling your Germany that you should not buy gas from Russia?
Well, we don't appreciate that sort of influence.
Was that a shocking thing probably they would like that, but to publicly say, for the U.S. government or Trump to say that Germany should not buy gas from your neighbor Russia?
Well, some are laughing about it, but I think it's a serious thing, especially if you look how our government reacts, or how it does not react. I'd say they should be very clear to say, well, we don't want to have that influence. But at the same time, we have that trade issues, laying in between the United States and the European Union, which is a big issue here as well.
Inter-imperialist rivalries.
Yes, it definitely is. It definitely is some sort, and if you look at the whole question on taxing imports.
Oh, import tax.
Import taxes, yeah, I think there's another...
Tariffs.
Yeah, tariffs, yeah.
And Trump is punishing, saying he's going to go into a trade war, or he is in a trade war with countries, and threatening that you're going to unless you do this, we'll raise the tariffs to the American market.
That's definitely a big issue, as German economy is very export-oriented and very dependent on that. We, as Die Linke, left, we say, well, our economy is too much export-dependent, but that's a different thing. At the same time, we are so interlinked with other markets, especially the US market. So this is a big issue, that there's this trade war going on.
What is the solution to trade war? Because it seems like it's growing globally, and it threatens to disrupt the whole world economy. With China, the United States has tariffs on China, it's threatening China, and the United States is fearful that China is going to be in control of the world economy. What's the view of Die Linke on that?
Well, even from our point of view, there's no easy solution on that. We are against general tariffs on imports. But at the same time, within these new, let's say, world market which is coming up, we are debating on the tariffs. For example, if you look on the ecological question, as we are struggling for higher ecological standards within our industry, we cannot at the same time say, okay, we are now importing the same products, which are much cheaper if they are produced in a not ecological ways, let's say in China or wherever, and just using the same products, let's say ecological footprint, was here before we hired the ecological standards here. So if we hire the ecological standards here for our industry, we have to safeguard that there's no like let's say dirty products being imported at the same time.
And Germany took the position that you wanted to phase out nuclear plants, that you did not believe that nuclear power was a safe, ecologically safe product. The Japanese Fukushima events, the Fukushima catastrophe, the meltdown, they are saying that it's been decontaminated, that it's okay. The Olympics Committee, the Abe government, the Olympics Committee, want to have the Olympics in Fukushima. To a part of it, the baseball, softball games, and Paralympics. What is the view of nuclear power and also the ability to so-called decontaminate a place like Fukushima? I mean, I know Chernobyl was close and created a very big fear in Germany because of the contamination of that plant. What's your view about this idea that you can decontaminate Fukushima, that you can have safe nuclear energy?
We don't believe in safe nuclear energy in general, no matter whether it's in Japan or it's in Germany. So we are very happy that we are phasing out of the nuclear energy here in Germany. Creating new problems on the energy supply, but we are very strong on that. So I can't actually tell from a technical point of view whether there's a chance of decontaminating.
That's what the government has said. It's clean, and you can go there. And so,
from my little knowledge on that, I cannot imagine that it's now decontaminated. But I don't know whether there's an option on having that in 50 or 100 years. But this is not a question. But the risk with nuclear energy is so high that you cannot, from a sensitive point of view, you cannot apply this technology.
And the United States is pushing ahead with more drilling, fracking, putting gas in the soil and in the ground to get more gas. What is the view of Die Linke around the issue of oil and the fossil fuel industries?
From an ecological point of view, if you look at the climate catastrophe we are facing, we are pushing for a fast phasing out of our dependency on fossil fuels or fossil energy. So, but there are worse and even more worse ways of producing and using even fossil energies, and fracking, for example, is really one of the worst I know about.
Creating earthquakes, actually, in the Midwest.
Creating earthquakes and quite another other disastrous effects on the people living in these areas.
And the water being contaminated.
Definitely. So we are opposed to that technique. There's a debate in Germany about fracking as well, but I think there's quite a strong opposition against it within the population, even because of the bad examples you know better in the US. So this is something we actually against, and we have a debate. You mentioned the from the other point of view, the debate on Germany importing Russian gas, and the economic reason because why Trump and others are putting pressure on the German government not to follow that path, importing Russian gas, is because the U.S. Energy industry wants to export its fracked gas to the European market, especially to the German market. And this is the high issue. It's not just because of the German-Russian relations. It's just because of a really strong economic interest within the U.S. economy, and this is also linked to the trade war issue. You probably know that one of the reasons why the trade war between the European Union and the US has not been further expanded by the US administration is because of there have been that small deal, like that Germany said, okay, we are not only importing Russian gas by this new Nord Stream through the Baltic Sea line, but also building this sort of hubs like for landing fracked US gas.
Ports for bringing in fracked gas.
Yes, exactly. So the official German position, the official government's position is saying we don't want to be dependent on one source or the other, which is fair enough, like from that strategic point of view, but so we can import Russian gas, but if the Russians don't want to supply us anymore, we can refer to, and there will be a market decision on what is like more efficient, what is cheaper. But behind the scenes, there was high pressure by the US government on the German government to accept these gas ports to be built in the North Sea or so there's an easy way to import frack gas to Germany.
Now, in the United States, there is a strong political propaganda campaign saying that the influence of Putin is overwhelming. That Putin and the Russians,
within the White House,
everywhere. The Russians are everywhere.
I was asking where
you know, the Russians were controlled the election in the United States. The Russians are here, there, and everywhere. It seems like the Russian boogeyman and Putin is a big issue in the United States. What do the people of Germany think about the Russians? Do they believe that Putin controls what is happening in Germany?
I don't think that the German people in general are thinking that like Putin or even Trump is controlling our country. But it depends who you talk to. But if you look at the polls, which are like the only empirical base I have, so you can say that both. Like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are both not very much respected within the German population. Both are having a bad image here. But to be honest, like the US president's image is even worse. But both having a really bad image here because of both are like seen as sort of authoritarian, like presidents within their own countries.
And, of course, Trump has attacked the press, journalists as scum. There's been an effort by the United States to bring back Julian Assange and to go after whistleblowers. What's the view of Die Linke about journalists and free speech rights?
Oh, journalists and whistleblowers' rights are very important, and we want to strengthen them. Luckily, the journalist situation, like in Germany at least, is still okay. There's no government attacks, not even on a verbal level like the ones you mentioned of your US president. There are harsh attacks from the right-wing opposition, those closely linked. We call the AfD, Alternative for Germany, they call themselves, which are like the right-wing opposition within our parliament, and they are really openly attacking these journalists and free coverage, especially if it's about them, of course. So there are harsh attacks, but this is not government policy, which is fair enough. The situation for whistleblowers in Germany is rather complicated because there's no legal protection for them by now. Depends on the issues they are like publishing, and usually at least they have to suffer loss of the jobs or anything like all these things. There is a European Union directive. You know, the German legal system is part of the European Union legal system, and this directive asks the European Union membership or member states to improve the conditions, to improve the protection for the whistleblowers. And this will be a debate within the coming years, how to implement a better legal protection. We, Die Linke, the left party, we are very much in favor of better protection for them. And as you mentioned, like Julian Assange, like his situation is really, really a big issue.
He might be dying because medical care he's being apparently not getting proper medical care.
I don't know. I don't want to judge on these details, but the general situation is, of course, worsening. So we have always been very clear on that. No matter on the person, Julian Assange, which is not the issue, which has his pros and cons, I suppose. But we always saying like the German government or another government of the European Union should be very clear and give him asylum here because like the things he's been charged with in the US like are things he should be rewarded for, like publishing like war crimes in fact. So this is something has to be like protected and not prosecuted. There's this other issue in Sweden, like on this, where we always said there has to be a fair trial on that. There's nothing to do with like what he's charged with in the United States. We have to separate these issues. But at the moment, we are hoping that the UK government, which is in charge, will not deport.
So you're against any deportation?
We're against any deportation for these charges he's charged with. We are not in general, if there's a criminal offense where we think there's a sensitive legal basis, but not for the charges he's charged with in the US.
And Brexit now and the government, the election in Britain. One of the reasons some workers and unions, few unions in Britain have supported the getting out of the EU is because they argue that the EU has forced deregulation in Britain. It's hurt the working people of Britain. What is your view about what's happening in Britain and the potential breakup of the European Union, which probably would be supported by Trump and others who would like to see a weakened Europe?
I think this is a very serious issue, and the reasons for why the EU was losing support are another issue, but definitely if the UK decides to leave the European Union, this will create new tensions, like economic tensions for sure, because this is a very much integrated economy and a market, so it will create quite a lot of disruptions on both sides. I think in the UK they will be much heavier.
Well, Trump wants to take over their health system, national health care, and make it efficient like the American health care system.
There's still a place for the 51st state, yeah. So I think
Greenland.
Okay, the 52nd state. Okay, so. Yeah, but seriously, that is, I think, for the people in the UK, this should be really worrying them, because this was at least like Boris Johnson's Conservatives are planning. Donald Trump cannot overtake the country by himself. He needs to support within the UK. But I think, yeah, that's a plan to at least economically make them part of the US empire at that point. But we are very much worried. So, and the question whether really the European Union was the one deregulating the UK, I'm not that sure whether that's true, but the UK comrades can tell better than I can. I think quite a lot of things happened in the 80s in the UK without any interference.
Thatcher.
Exactly.
Margaret
Thatcher. And she didn't need the help of any European Union to deregulate. So if you talk to trade union legal experts, they all say the labor law in European Union is much better than it is within the UK by itself, and quite a lot of improvements have come from Brussels. So they are now actually fearing that, like, the labour law will worsening again. On the other hand, we have problems like with this whole issue of state subsidies, which is very important if you want to have a strong public sector. And there are strong regulations on the European level against public subsidies and all this stuff, which indeed can in the end have some deregulating effects, but usually it's not like there's no hard law that works out in a way. And within the European Union member states, quite often the national governments use like the European Union level or the Brussels as an excuse for what they want to do. So in some respect, there are quite a lot of problems with the European integration, how it is constructed, but it's not the main reason for like deregulation or anything. Quite often the national politics are more responsible for that than European integration is.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us on WorkWeek Radio, and glad we had the opportunity to learn about some of the issues facing the German people, the German working class. Thank you.
Thank you.